I embraced the challenge to find new country, new family. So I was happy. I came to this country.
I still remember the first night there, when all was pitch dark, except for the tugboats and the ferry crossing over on the water, crossing the bay back and forth, and all I could see was the lights of New Jersey across the water, and those little lights on the boats crisscrossing back and forth in the dark.
I was about 7, 8 years old, and we had the opportunity to sign up for the Kearney Public Library. I wasn't allowed to do it. I don't think my parents understood that or what it entailed. And being immigrants, they didn't, I guess, look into it. Maybe like in today's world, if that happened, if a child was asked to join something and the parent really didn't understand it, that parent would contact the teacher and say, well, what is this that my child is going to sign up? Well, in those days, you know, they didn't know to do that. The school was one thing and home was something else. So I was not allowed to do that, and I was not allowed to become a Girl Scout or a Brownie or whatever. You could call it ignorance, but it's not. They weren't ignorant. My parents certainly were not ignorant. They just did not know the culture as well as somebody who was born here and maybe lived here all their lives and were exposed to things. So those were limitations. There was some fear, yes. I don't think they understood what it entailed. Maybe they thought I would be there a long time, out a long time, or it was far, who knows. But I'm sure it was based on fear. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
I came here when I was 19 years old in 1949. My story is like my husband. He grew up here. My story is different because I came after going to school, leaving my family behind. That is a very hard thing to do, leave your family behind.
I left Aji Costello with my mother, and I was not even 6 years old when I left, because my 6th birthday was on board the ship coming to America. So I only remember a few instances in particular of my life in Aji Costello before that age. At that time, my father was already here in America, and he had been working for the previous 5 years as a longshoreman, working and earning the money, sending so that he could call my mother and me over to join him in America. At that time, that's the only way he could bring over his wife.
When I think about my growing up, actually until even high school, I don't think I even was aware of the fact that I was a child of immigrants.
Of course, I was plunked right in the water of the 1st grade, but I didn't know a word of English, nothing. They didn't have to teach the 1st grade students how to speak Italian to help me, as they would be doing now with the Spanish to teach the incoming students. I was dunked right into the 1st grade, and within a few weeks I was getting along with the English that I picked up from day to day with my compatriots, with my new buddies. But there was one teacher there, the 1st grade teacher, that helped me a lot. I still remember her name. Her name was Mrs. Wormsley. She was great. She was wonderful. I loved her. I fell in love with her. 6 years old. I took to the classwork, and went on to further studies there. Went to junior high school, and from junior high school, I elected to go to vocational school at the Brooklyn end of the Manhattan Bridge, and occasionally we would go to walk from Erie Basin, which was Red Hook, walk to school to the high school at Flatbush Avenue Extension, and it would take that would be a good stretch of the legs, maybe about a mile and a half or 2 miles to go to high school. But we would take the trolley car to help us along most of the way. Now, after high school, I graduated. I got my first job, which was making wallets, leather wallets. I didn't last long there because there's no future without any money in the wallets. So I looked for another job. This time it was a place that was assembling radios. Well, I liked that better. Besides, I was trying to get a job, and those people were out on strike. Hey, one person needs a job, another person is out on strike, so somebody has to get it. So I tried to get it, and I got it. So we got the job, and I started working in the place. And I worked there for the first few years. Then the war began. The United States was attacked by Japan. I was in my 20s at that time, and I was drafted. I was drafted and sent to the Pacific. Just as well, because if I had been drafted and sent to the European theater, I would have been fighting the Germans, which is okay too. Anyhow, I spent 2 years in the service. That I took my discharge over there in Japan because the war had just ended. I stayed another 6 months in order to accumulate a little more money, because then I was doing the same job as a GI, but this time I was getting paid as a civilian for 6 months, and I accumulated a little more money to take home. Then my mother wanted to go back to see her mother and her relations, and she wanted me to go with her too. So there again, we took another trip back. So this was what? How many years later, after 1928, which when we arrived here. So this was 1948. 20 years later, we went back.
The first time I saw her was when she arrived in New York City on the return from the trip that my mom and my brother made to Sicily in 1948. They went there after the war so that my mother could see her mother and they could correspond, because we are talking about a time now when maybe there were telephones, but they certainly weren't good phones, and you couldn't always get connected. They had connection by letter, and they went through a whole Second World War, not really knowing who was living and who was dead unless you got that letter. So then when Frankie was there, he met and married Olga.
And we returned to Sicily, and we went to see our relations, to meet them again. And I knocked on a door, and there was a half door, one of those Dutch half doors. We knocked on the door, and the top half opened up, and who do I see but a woman, or a young girl, called Olga. A bright, golden-haired, braided young girl, bright and beautiful.